Formation of the canon of the New Testament. When the first Christians consulted the Holy Scriptures, they used the Old Testament, the only canon of Scripture in existence at the time. Since Greek was the common language of the ancient Mediterranean world, and the early church, the version most widely read was the Septuagint, LXX, the standard Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. According to a traditional account preserved in the letter of Aristeas and later Jewish and Christian sources, Ptolemy II, Philadelphus of Egypt, 285 to 246 BC, commissioned 72 Jewish scholars to translate the Scriptures into Greek for the Library of Alexandria. While parts of this account are legendary, the translation itself dates from the 3rd to 2nd centuries BC and was already in wide use before the Christian era. The Septuagint is older than the standardized Hebrew Masoretic text, and most Old Testament quotations in the Gospels and other New Testament writings follow the Septuagint. It contains books not found in the Masoretic text, 49 in total according to Orthodox reckoning, and these were received as scripture by the ancient church. At the Protestant Reformation, most reformers rejected the Septuagint canon in favor of the Masoretic canon of 39 books, referring to the additional books as apocrypha, hidden. The Orthodox Church continues to use the Septuagint as its Old Testament. Some modern Orthodox describe the additional books as deuterocanonical or readable, though they remain part of the Church's liturgical and theological life. The Masoretic text, standardized centuries after Christ, contains significant differences from the Septuagint, including in key prophecies. Early Christian writers such as Saint Justin Martyr accused post-Christian Jewish authorities of deliberately altering certain passages to obscure messianic prophecies used by the Church. For example, Isaiah 7:14 in the Septuagint reads, "A virgin, Parthena, shall conceive," while the Masoretic text uses "young woman," Alma, weakening the explicit prophecy of the virgin birth cited in Matthew 1:23. Psalm 22:16 in the Septuagint reads, "They pierced my hands and my feet," a clear foreshadowing of the crucifixion, while the Masoretic text says, "Like a lion are my hands and feet," which obscures the prophetic imagery. Numerous other passages, including in Psalm 46, Jeremiah, and Daniel, differ in ways that can alter theological meaning, further reinforcing why the Orthodox Church has always maintained the Septuagint as its authoritative Old Testament text. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls has confirmed that in many of the very passages most debated between Christians and Jews, the Septuagint preserves older pre-Christian Hebrew text traditions, demonstrating that these differences are not Christian alterations, but authentic ancient variants later abandoned in the rabbinic tradition. The recognition of the New Testament canon developed gradually, reaching broad agreement only in the latter half of the 4th century. In the early centuries, heterodox movements produced writings claiming apostolic origin, such as the Gospel of Thomas or Gospel of Judas, which the Church rejected. A major early challenge came from Marcion, mid-2nd century, who discarded the Old Testament entirely and accepted only a shortened version of Luke's Gospel and 10 Pauline epistles. This spurred the Church to clarify which writings were genuinely apostolic. By the late 2nd century, the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were firmly recognized across the Church. Theophilus of Antioch, c. 180, is the earliest known writer to explicitly describe the Gospels as divinely inspired alongside Old Testament scripture, also calling some Pauline letters the divine word. St. Irenaeus of Lyons, c. 180 to 189, defended the fourfold gospel against both additions and reductions. Around the same time, the Muratorian fragment, discovered in 1740 by Ludovico Antonio Muratori and generally dated to c. 170 to 200, though some scholars argue for a later date, provides the earliest surviving list of New Testament writings used in the Roman Church. In its damaged form, it affirms at least 22 of the 27 books later recognized in the canon, the 4 Gospels, though Matthew is missing from the surviving text, likely due to manuscript loss. Acts, 13 Pauline epistles, Romans, 1 to 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 to 2 Thessalonians, 1 to 2 Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Jude, 1 to 2 John, and the book of Revelation. It also includes the Wisdom of Solomon, an Old Testament deuterocanonical book, and the revelation of Peter, which was later rejected from the canon. Notably absent are Hebrews, James, 1 to 2 Peter, and 3 John, reflecting regional differences in reception. This shows that by the late 2nd century, the core of the New Testament was already well established, even if some books remained disputed in certain areas. The first complete surviving list matching the 27 books of the modern New Testament appears in St. Athanasius of Alexandria's 39th Festal letter of 367 AD. This annual Paschal Easter letter, part of an Alexandrian custom reinforced after the Council of Nicaea, 325, standardized the calculation of Paschal Easter, is the earliest known document to list exactly the New Testament books used today. However, St. Athanasius' list did not instantly remove all local variations. One major point of difference was the Book of Revelation. While it had long been accepted in the West and cited by early fathers like St. Fulgentius, Irenaeus, and St. Hippolytus, many in the East hesitated to receive it fully because heretical groups, especially the Monanists, used it to promote extreme apocalyptic teachings. As a result, some Eastern canon lists continue to omit Revelation for centuries after St. Athanasius. Its eventual acceptance in the East was greatly aided in the early 7th century by St. Peleus Andrew of Caesarea's authoritative commentary, which provided a theologically sound and anti-heretical interpretation. This helped normalize its canonical status in the East, though the Byzantine lectionary has never included it for public liturgical reading. Regional councils in North Africa soon confirmed St. Athanasius' New Testament list. The Synod of Hippo, 393, and the Councils of Carthage, 397 and 419, issued canons matching his 27 books. These were local, not ecumenical gatherings, but they reflected the growing consensus of the wider church. Centuries later, the Quinisex Council in Trullo, 692, incorporated the African Code, which included the Carthage canon, into the broader body of church law, solidifying the list across the Christian world. The Greek word canon, rule or measuring rod, describes the function of the canon, a standard for the church's liturgical and doctrinal life. The New Testament canon arose from the worship and teaching of the church. In judging which writings were apostolic, bishops compared their contents with the faith handed down from the apostles, holy tradition, and rejected any that contradicted it. For example, near the end of the 2nd century, St. Serapion, Bishop of Antioch, forbade the use of the so-called Gospel of Peter in the Church of Rosses because its teachings diverged from the apostolic faith. Thus, the Church did not create its faith from the Bible alone. Rather, it recognized as Scripture those writings that faithfully express the apostolic tradition already alive in the Church from the beginning. The apostles preached the gospel, established the Church, and handed down the faith before a single line of the New Testament was written. The New Testament books themselves were written within the Church, preserved by the Church, and discerned as authoritative by the Church. In this sense, the Bible is a fruit of the Church's life, not its source. For this reason, the Orthodox Church continues to interpret the Bible within the life of Holy Tradition. Holy Tradition is not a separate authority from Scripture, but the living context that gave birth to Scripture and ensures its right understanding. As St. Vincent of Lerins wrote in 445 AD, moreover, in the Catholic Church itself, all possible care must be taken that we hold that faith which has been believed everywhere, always, by all. In the early Church, the Greek word katholikos came from according to, olos, whole, with the related adverb katholu, meaning according to the whole, in general, or complete. When Christians called the Church Katholiki Ecclesia, they meant the whole Church in the fullness of faith and sacrament, particularly as manifested in the local Eucharistic assembly under its bishop, not a centralized papal institution. Only centuries later in the medieval West, especially after the Gregorian reforms and the consolidation of papal power, was Catholic retroactively redefined to mean the worldwide institution under the Pope. Reading this later meaning back into the Fathers is historically anachronistic. Catholicity in the early Church was measured by fidelity to the apostolic deposit and unity with other churches holding the same faith, not by submission to one bishop overall. When Scripture is read apart from this tradition, detached from the Church that produced it, the result is inevitably divisions, schisms, and conflicting private interpretations, precisely what the apostolic witness and the fathers warned against.